All right, concept two. So discuss the breakup of the Federalist Party and the rise of the Republicans, the Democratic Republicans, by the election of 1800. Alexander Hamilton was. Oops, let me get to the. So here we go. So Alexander Hamilton was the best known member of the Federalist Party. Now that Washington had bowed out. But his financial policies, some of which had fattened speculators, and his suggestion that the president and senators be elected for life, had made him so unpopular that he could not hope to be elected president. The Federalists were forced to turn to the experienced but ungracious John Adams, who had no appeal to the masses and had no desire to cultivate any. Adams suffered from several handicaps as a politician, one of which was following the footsteps of Washington. Another was he was hated by Hamilton, who secretly plotted with some of Adams' cabinet members against him. Two events ruined Adams' political career. So the first was in foreign policy, and it involved the so-called XYZ affair. So foreign affairs immediately occupied Adams' full attention. The French government regarded the Jay Treaty signed by the United States during Washington's administration with the British an affront, particularly after the French effort during the American War for Independence. Relations between the two countries steadily deteriorated, and in 1797, French privateers began seizing American ships. And within a year, they had captured more than 300 vessels. And so what we're basically seeing here is what people like John Dickinson were very worried about. What if we win, right? What if we win? So they have won, right? Here's this new country, and they're being picked off a little bit here and there by these big, powerful empires. So in order to avoid further conflict, Adams sent a three-man commission to negotiate with the French. At the start of the negotiations, the American commissioners were insulted by the demands for bribes by the three French commissioners. The Americans opted to come home. The diplomatic humiliation suffered by the three commissioners set off a domestic political explosion when Adams presented the commissioners' report to Congress. The three Frenchmen were dubbed Mr. X, Y, and Z in the report, and the report that spelled out the demands for bribes and led to the Federalists in Congress to cry for war. The XYZ affair did lead to an undeclared war, or the quasi-war, from 1798 to 1800. But Adams brought an end to the war against the desire of many of his own party members in a treaty called the Convention of 1800. He also threatened to resign if the party did not support his efforts. As a result, the Federalist Party split beyond repair, and this helped make it possible for the Democratic Republicans to win the election of 1800. The second event which impacted Adams' presidency involved the domestic policy and centered around the Alien Sedition Acts. Because of the results of the XYZ affair with France and the undeclared war that followed, the passions of the domestic politics became very heated during Adams' administration from 1797 to 1801. The Federalists had meanwhile capitalized on the anti-French frenzy to drive through Congress a series of laws in 1798 designed to silence their Jeffersonian foes of political criticism. These laws were called the Alien and Sedition Acts. The acts gave the president the power to deport foreigners who were critical of the president, Congress, or the country in general. The acts were aimed at the political activity of the pro-French immigrants and the British Irish. Besides threatening to deport the immigrants, one of the acts raised the residence requirements for American citizenship from 5 years to 14 years. The act was aimed at keeping the aliens from voting Democratic-Republican. The last of the alien acts, and the one that caused Adams and the Federalists the most terrible trouble, was the Sedition Act. The act was intended to silence Democratic-Republican newspapermen and provided for a fine or imprisonment for anyone who tried to, quote, impede the operation of any law, unquote, or who uttered any, quote, false, scandalous, and malicious, unquote, criticism of high government officials. Right. So it was open to a lot of interpretation. Under the act, about 25 folks were arrested and 10 convicted. Most of them Democratic-Republican editors who were conveniently got out of the way by heavy fines or jail sentences. A tavern loiterer, a barfly basically, in New York, New Jersey, was jailed for expressing the wish that wadding a cannon shot fired in the president's honor might ledge in Adams' backside. The Sedition Act made martyrs of the Democratic-Republican Party and made the Federalists and John Adams very unpopular, which helped the Democratic-Republicans and Jefferson win the election of 1800. You also had the along with this, you had the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions were Republicans' reaction to the Sedition Act. The resolutions appealed to the First Amendment of the Constitution, quite obviously, right? Which forbids Congress to pass any law abridging the freedom of speech or the press. The Federalist layers adopted Blackstone's definition that freedom of the press meant merely freedom from censorship prior to publication. Republicans' protests was led by Jefferson and Madison, who proposed the resolutions. The resolutions attacked the Federalists' broad interpretation of the Constitution and supported the Republicans' weak interpretation, which gave justification for states' rights. The resolutions claimed that the states composing the United States had entered into a compact, the Constitution, to which the states were equal parties and thus had equal rights to judge for themselves when the compact had been violated. The resolutions were sent to the other state legislatures with the hope that they might receive favorable action, but nothing happened as the resolutions just faded away when the Federalists stopped enforcing the Sedition Act. The net effect of the resolutions was that they made clear to the public the policies of each party as to how the government should be run. So it was more of a mission statement, basically, for the Democratic Republicans versus the Federalists. The influence of the resolutions did not die, as almost every politician between 1798 and 1860 appealed to the doctrine of states' rights when his section seemed oppressed. The Civil War was supposed to have killed the resolutions, but their theme have been quoted from the Civil Rights Movement in the 1960s to the present. So that will be Concept 2, and I will talk to you guys later in Concept 3. See you there.